At 4:22 a.m. local time, the USS Ronald Reagan is running a high-tempo flight cycle 78 miles east of Okinawa. 2 F-35Cs are airborne, fuel states already tight, the night deck lit in red and amber as the recovery crew prepares for traps. The Reagan's radar warning operators are watching a lot of sky. They always are in this theater. The watch section in the Combat Information Center has been at it for 6 hours. 4 operators at consoles casting blue-white light across their faces, coffee cups wedged into the rails, headsets on, eyes moving between the primary display and the secondary correlation screen that cross-references everything SPY-6 sees against the theater air picture fed down from the Joint Space Operations Center at Vandenberg. It is routine. It is the particular kind of tense routine that experienced operators learn to inhabit without burning out, because if you treat every hour at this console as a crisis, you are useless by month 3 of deployment. At 4:22 a.m., there is nothing anomalous on the scope. No ballistic launch signatures, no boost phase plumes crawling up from the Xinjiang Plateau. The intelligence picture says the PLARF brigade at Hami has been quiet for 72 hours. The morning SIGINT summary, delivered to the strike group intelligence officer at 0300, flagged routine communications traffic at the Hami garrison, administrative frequencies, logistics, coordination, nothing elevated. The National Reconnaissance Office had repositioned one of its radar imaging satellites to cover the Taklamakan Basin 48 hours earlier, following an inconclusive period of launcher activity. The imagery showed vehicles in revetments, vehicles staying in revetments. The intelligence picture is wrong. 4 DF-26B anti-ship ballistic missiles leave their launchers inside a 14-second window. The salvo is already supersonic before the first satellite cue reaches the E-2D Hawkeye orbiting 60 miles south. The launch happens from a prepared position 23 kilometers northeast of Hami, a hardened launch pad complex that the NRO's radar imagery had been reading as a storage facility because the camouflage netting over the launch pads had been in place continuously for 11 days. 11 days of a net sitting over a pad reads as an inactive pad. The PLARF brigade commander understood this. The netting came down at 4:18 a.m., 4 minutes before launch, in the dark, with no active radar emissions from the site that would have triggered a warning. The Hawkeye operator calls the track at 4:23 a.m. plus 40 seconds. Clipped, precise language. 4 tracks, bearing from launch origin, velocity profile consistent with anti-ship ballistic missile, estimated time to terminal phase, 4 minutes 18 seconds. The Reagan's Combat Information Center lights up. The SP-6 array, the most capable naval radar the United States has ever put to sea, acquires all 4 inbounds simultaneously at a range of 1,100 kilometers, painting them with a clarity the older SPY 1D radars on the escorts cannot match at that distance. Here is the equation that matters in the next 4 minutes. 4 missiles, 4 SM-6 interceptors minimum per bird to achieve a reliable kill probability. 16 rounds from the total magazine the Reagan's escorts carry. The math is not comfortable. Strike Group Commander Rear Admiral David Loring receives the CIC's threat assessment and engagement recommendation in the same breath. He has time to ask one question before the window for optimizing the intercept geometry closes. He asks it. Before going further, you need to understand that this is not the scenario the Navy modeled in 2019. The DF-26B in threat assessment databases is a road-mobile, conventionally armed anti-ship ballistic missile with a maneuvering re-entry vehicle. Range bracket, 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers. It was designed for exactly this geometry. A carrier strike group operating inside the second island chain, close enough to Okinawa to support land-based air, far enough from the Chinese coast that it feels safe. That feeling is the vulnerability. Before we go deeper, pause for a second. The Reagan's SP-6 has acquired all 4 inbounds. The strike group commander has roughly 90 seconds before terminal phase begins. What do you think the right call is here? A. Commit the full SM-6 magazine to intercept all 4 missiles and accept the reload vulnerability that follows. B. Attempt a partial intercept on the two missiles with the highest impact probability and maneuver the ship to complicate terminal guidance on the others. C. Something else entirely. A decision that turns on a capability most viewers don't know the Reagan carried that night. Drop your call in the comments right now. We will get there in about 3 minutes. Let's run the tape. The strike group's defensive picture in the 90 seconds before impact looks like this. USS Antietam, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, is the primary shooter. 122 VLS cells, a mixed load of SM-2 Block III C and SM-6. USS Benfold and USS Milius, both Arleigh Burke Flight 3AA destroyers, are screening east and south. Combined magazine. Enough for 2 full salvos against a 4-bird raid, with degraded confidence against maneuvering re-entry vehicles at terminal phase. The Antietam's tactical action officer has already called his shot. 2 SM-6 rounds per inbound on missiles 1, 2, and 4, with missile 3 assigned to the Benfold as primary shooter because the engagement geometry from Benfold's position gives a fractionally better intercept basket angle. The Benfold's SPY-1D picks up all 4 tracks, and the Cooperative Engagement Capability Network shares the fire control solution across all 3 surface combatants inside 6 seconds. That part works exactly as advertised. CEC data link latency between platforms is under 100 milliseconds, fast enough that each ship's fire control computer works from a picture that is functionally identical to the others, a single composite track built from 3 sensors rather than 3 separate, potentially conflicting ones. In the 1990s, when CEC was being developed, this was the breakthrough. Not better missiles, but a better network. A shared picture is worth more than a better radar. What does not work as advertised is the engagement geometry on Missile 3, the DF-26B's maneuvering re-entry vehicle. The MAR-V configuration, observed in test footage from Korla since the early 2020s, is capable of lateral maneuvers of up to 40 kilometers during terminal descent. The Antietam's fire control solution for Missile 3 calculates intercept at 18 kilometers altitude. The MAR-V executes a 22-kilometer lateral pull at 24 kilometers altitude, outside the intercept basket. The SM-6 passes through empty sky. What happens in the Benfold CIC in the next 4 seconds is a compressed version of everything that makes counter-ballistic missile defense the hardest problem in naval warfare. The tracking system updates the Missile 3 solution in real time. The tactical action officer sees the intercept failure on his display before the SM-6 has even completed its terminal burn. He calls the second shot. The Benfold's VLS fires a second SM-6. The round is in the air within 3 seconds of the miscall, which is operationally exceptional, a product of the crew's drill discipline over the previous months. But the geometry has already degraded. The second SM-6 is chasing a solution that is changing faster than the round can correct. The Antietam's combat system launches a second SM-6 at Missile 3 as well, overlapping the Benfold shot in what engagement doctrine calls shoot, look, shoot plus. A recognition that against a maneuvering target, simultaneous salvos from multiple platforms improve the aggregate probability of kill, even if no single round has a high individual probability. The Antietam's round achieves proximity detonation at 4,100 meters altitude, 900 meters short of the calculated kill zone, the warhead fragments. But a fragmenting DF-26B re-entry vehicle at 4,100 meters altitude and Mach 5. 2 is not a neutralized threat. It is a debris field traveling at Mach 5-2. The debris field impacts the ocean 410 meters off the Reagan's starboard catapult at 4:26 a.m. The shock transmission through the water at that range is enough to ring the hull. Every loose fitting on the 0-3 level rattles. Sailors below decks who are not strapped in the galley, in the berthing compartments, in the medical bay where the night corpsman is halfway through a routine medication check, are thrown against bulkheads or knocked off their feet. The ship's medical officer will later document 14 minor injuries from the shock alone. Bruises, a split lip, 1 sprained wrist from a sailor who caught himself on a hatch frame. The SP-6 array on the forward face of the island takes spall from secondary fragments. Not a penetrating hit, but enough to degrade 2 of its 6 radar faces by an estimated 30%. Specific panels on the forward quadrant show burn scoring and small penetration pits from debris traveling at several hundred meters per second. The array does not go down. It continues tracking. But its accuracy in the forward sector, exactly the sector where a follow-on PLARF salvo would most likely approach from, is now compromised. 3 sailors on the starboard catwalk are down, lacerations from spall fragments that crossed the deck edge, 1 suspected fractured shoulder from the pressure wave, and a 3rd sailor who went down hard when the catwalk structure flexed under shock loading and threw him against the railing. The ship's medical team reaches them within 90 seconds. And there are still 2 F-35Cs airborne with fuel states that read critical. What is worth saying plainly here is that the engagement worked. The system performed within its design parameters. 3 of 4 missiles were intercepted. The 4th was significantly degraded before impact. No penetrating warhead struck the ship. By every metric in the CONOPS, this is a successful defense. And yet, 3 sailors are wounded. The Reagan's primary radar is degraded, and the strike group commander is now operating in a contested environment with a reduced magazine and 2 jets that need to land in the next 11 minutes or go into the water. That is what working as designed looks like in this theater. The emergency recovery of the 2 F-35Cs takes 9 minutes. The deck crew performs it in near-total radio silence. The strike group has gone MCON, emissions control, because the PLARF brigade at Hami may be preparing a second salvo, and every radar emission from the Reagan is a targeting cue. The landing signal officers are working with wands and deck lighting only. The first F-35C traps on the first pass. The second bolters. The tailhook skips the wire and goes around for a second approach with fuel state reading bingo. Bingo is the point at which the pilot has exactly enough fuel to complete 1 more approach and land. There is no go-around after bingo. The pilot, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, knows this. He knows it calmly and precisely the way naval aviators know things that would cause most people to freeze, as a fact that requires a specific response executed with total focus, not as a crisis requiring emotional processing. He calls bingo state on the radio, the landing signal officers acknowledge it, and the deck crew confirms the wire is reset and clear in the time it takes Webb to complete the downwind leg of the pattern. The second trap catches the 3-wire at 4:35 a.m. Webb climbs out of the cockpit on deck with 210 pounds of fuel remaining, enough for approximately 4 minutes of flight. The deck crew chief claps him once on the shoulder without a word and turns back to securing the aircraft. At 4:36 a.m., Rear Admiral Loring declares mission kill risk condition and gets on the secure line to PACFLT. The conversation lasts approximately 3 minutes. Loring provides damage assessment. SP-6 degraded, 3 personnel casualties, missile magazine expenditure, current MCON posture, the Hami Brigade's assessed readiness for a follow-on salvo based on the intelligence officer's best estimate. PACFLT Commander Admiral Sarah Chen asks 2 questions. Loring answers them. Admiral Chen tells him to stand by. What Loring does not know in that moment, what nobody in the Reagan's Combat Information Center knows, is that the response to what just happened has been in the air for 11 hours. Here is what the PLARF strategic planners at the 2nd Artillery College war-gamed for this scenario. A DF-26B salvo against a carrier strike group generates a response timeline of 4 to 6 hours minimum. Time for the carrier to assess damage, time for the authorization chain to run from theater commander through PACOM through SecDef, time for strike packages to spin up from Guam or Anderson or the Reagan's own air wing. 4 to 6 hours is enough time to disperse the launch brigade, relocate the mobile launchers, collapse the targeting solution. The flaw in that model is that it assumes the response originates after the attack. The 509th Bomb Wing at Whiteman Air Force Base launched a 2-ship B-21 Raider package at 5:30 p.m. the previous evening. The launch was not in response to the DF-26B salvo. It could not have been, because the salvo had not yet happened. The launch was in response to 72 hours of SIGINT collection showing the PLARF Hami Brigade cycling through what analysts at the National Reconnaissance Office assessed as pre-launch preparation sequences. The brigade had been quiet, but quiet in a specific way. The kind of quiet that comes after you have completed your checklist. The decision to launch the Raider package was made by PACFLT in coordination with the Joint Chiefs and the Office of the Secretary of Defense at approximately 3 p.m. the previous afternoon, following a focused intelligence review that the NRO requested after its satellite reposition flagged anomalous thermal signatures at the Hami site. Not launch signatures, thermal signatures consistent with the preconditioning of propellant systems, the kind of low observable preparation that does not show up as activity if you are not looking for it specifically. The NRO analyst who flagged it had spent 14 months at a prior assignment studying FLARF launch site thermal behavior. She had seen this pattern in test data twice before. She wrote a 4-paragraph note and sent it up the chain at 1:45 p.m. By 3 p.m., the 509th's mission order was being cut. The two Raiders flew northeast across the Pacific at altitude, refueled once from a KC-46 tanker operating out of Misawa, and reached their hold orbit over the Sea of Japan at 2:15 a.m. local time. They were there, turning slow circles at altitude, when the DF-26B salvo left Hami. They were still there when the debris field hit 410 meters off the Reagan's starboard catapult. Inside the lead Raider's cockpit, the two-person crew, aircraft commander and mission systems officer, received a data-linked update at 4:28 a.m. that told them the Reagan had taken shrapnel damage and that the strike group was in MCON. They did not receive weapons release authorization at that moment. What they received was a confirmation that the pre-planned target package for the Korla range remained valid, and that authorization was being pursued through the chain. They were told to maintain their hold orbit. They turned another slow circle over the Sea of Japan and waited. The authorization chain, according to a leaked Indo-PACOM SITREP, ran from Rear Admiral Loring's Mission Kill Risk Declaration through PACFLT Commander Admiral Chen to SecDef's duty officer inside 14 minutes. That is a theater record. The previous fastest authorization for a strike of this category was 22 minutes during an exercise in 2024. The difference is that 14 minutes ago, shrapnel crossed an American flight deck. At 4:50 a.m. local time, the two B-21 Raiders received their execute order and turned southwest toward Xinjiang. Worth stopping here for a moment, because the next part of this story turns on a capability that most coverage gets wrong. The B-21 Raider is described in open-source literature as a stealth bomber. That is accurate, but incomplete. The more operationally significant point is that the B-21 is the first American bomber designed from the initial concept phase to operate inside an integrated air defense system built around the S-400 and HQ-9 family. The B-2 Spirit was designed to defeat Soviet radar networks, specifically the early warning and acquisition radars of the 1970s and 1980s. It does that exceptionally well. Against a modern Chinese IADS with networked low-frequency VHF radars, look-down, shoot-down fighters, and passive infrared detection systems, the B-2's radar cross-section is manageable but not negligible. The B-21's cross-section in the most contested frequency bands is classified. What is not classified is the engineering principle behind it. The B-2 was designed to minimize radar return in the X and Ku bands, the frequencies used by fire control radars. The B-21 was designed to minimize radar return across a broader spectrum, including the VHF and UHF bands used by China's JY-27A long-range acquisition radars. If you look at the B-21's planform, the shape is seen from above. You notice something the B-2 does not have: a continuous curvature across the leading edge with no angular transitions. Every angular transition on an aircraft is a corner reflector. Corner reflectors are loud. Think of it this way. The B-2 is a very quiet car in a neighborhood where everyone is listening for engine noise. The B-21 is a very quiet car in a neighborhood where everyone has installed seismic sensors in the pavement. Different problem, different solution. The ingress route the two Raiders flew to Korla was not the most direct path from their hold orbit. It was a route built over months by the Air Force's electronic warfare planning community. A corridor through the seams of China's Western IADS architecture that exploited three specific gaps. A coverage hole in the JY-27A network west of Urumqi caused by terrain masking from the Tian Shan range, a scheduled maintenance window for a Type 305B radar north of Korla that SIGINT had flagged as a recurring pattern on the first Tuesday of every month, and a fighter patrol gap in the Xinjiang Military District's air defense sector that opened between 0430 and 0600 local time during low activity periods. The PLARF's decision to conduct the Reagan strike during that window, presumably to minimize their own exposure to American counter-targeting, had inadvertently synchronized with the window the raiders needed. The two raiders cross into Xinjiang airspace at altitude. The Korla test range's organic air defense, a battery of HQ-9B surface-to-air missiles, and a Type 305B phased array acquisition radar, does not acquire either aircraft before weapons release. The HQ-9B battery commander will later report, in a post-incident assessment, that Chinese military authorities did not intend to become public, that his radar operator observed what he described as intermittent ground clutter anomalies in the northern sector approximately 90 seconds before the first impact. The assessment concludes that the anomalies may have been the raiders' wake turbulence interacting with the desert surface at very low temperatures. By the time the battery recognized the anomalies as potentially significant, the first weapon was already in terminal descent. Here is where the cost asymmetry in this mission becomes the actual story. The Korla anti-ship ballistic missile test range is not just a patch of desert with launch pads. It is the PLARF's primary validation facility for the DF-26 series guidance package. The telemetry station co-located with the range, a cluster of antenna arrays and data processing bunkers, is where every test flight's terminal guidance data goes after impact. The MAR-V maneuver that defeated the Reagan's SM-6 intercept? The parameters for that maneuver were refined at Korla over the course of 12 test shots across a 26-month period. The seeker logic that allows a DF-26B re-entry vehicle to update its aim point during terminal phase using radar altimetry, developed and validated at Korla. The discrimination algorithm that allows the re-entry vehicle to distinguish a carrier's radar cross-section from its escorts at terminal phase ranges, Korla. The range complex spans approximately 18 kilometers of hardened infrastructure in the Tarim Basin. It includes 3 primary launch pads with associated flame deflector trenches, a downrange telemetry reception array covering a 40-kilometer capture zone, 2 hardened processing bunkers rated against conventional air attack, a fuel and oxidizer storage complex for test vehicle preparation, and a separate facility for the optical and infrared tracking cameras that provide visual confirmation of terminal impact behavior. The total construction investment, based on commercial satellite imagery analysis and open-source Chinese procurement records, is estimated between $4 and $6 billion over the facility's construction and upgrade history. The PLARF does not have another facility that does what Korla does. There is a secondary range at Jiuquan, nominally a space launch center, but with dual-use test infrastructure. It takes roughly 18 months to reconfigure Jiuquan for ballistic missile terminal guidance validation at the fidelity the Korla range provides. Each B-21 carries 2 GBU-57A/B massive ordnance penetrators on this mission. The MOP is a 30,000-pound bunker-defeating weapon, 5,300 pounds of tritonal explosive in a 5-foot hardened steel casing. It was designed to penetrate 200 feet of reinforced concrete before detonation. The weapon is released from altitude and falls in a near-vertical trajectory, guided by GPS and inertial navigation, achieving impact velocities that drive the casing through hardened structures before the explosive initiates. The Korla telemetry bunkers are not rated to that standard. They were hardened against conventional air attack, against cruise missile strikes, against anything short of a dedicated bunker-defeating munition. They were not designed for this. The first MOP impacts the primary telemetry processing bunker at 5:28 a.m. local time, 38 minutes after the first DF-26B detonated in the water off the Reagan's Starboard catapult. The weapon penetrates to an estimated depth of 60 meters before initiating. The bunker roof, rated at 12 meters of reinforced concrete, is insufficient. The detonation removes the processing bunker from the target list permanently. The second MOP takes the secondary antenna array, specifically the downrange reception cluster, a forest of dish and dipole antennas mounted on hardened concrete pedestals that represent the range's ability to receive and process terminal phase telemetry from test rounds downrange. Without the antenna array, the processing bunkers are receivers without ears. Without the processing bunkers, the antenna array is a collector with nowhere to send data. Each weapon removes the other's redundancy. The third MOP goes into the main launch control facility, the hardened operations center from which the range's test shots are controlled, monitored, and assessed in real time. This is where the engineers sit during a test. This is where the chief scientist of the 2nd Artillery Research Institute's DF-26 program has sat for 11 of the last 12 test shots. He was not there at 5:28 a.m. He was in a hotel in Urumqi, 470 kilometers to the northeast, attending a quarterly program review scheduled 3 weeks earlier. This detail, if accurate, is either a coincidence or evidence of an intelligence collection capability that extended far enough into the PLARF's internal scheduling to enable a targeting decision designed to destroy infrastructure without killing specific scientific personnel. The fourth MOP impacts the fuel and oxidizer storage infrastructure, a cluster of hardened storage tanks and transfer systems representing the logistical depth of the range's operational capacity. The secondary explosions from the propellant storage are visible from 40 kilometers. A Kazakh truck driver on the N217 highway west of Kashi, 340 kilometers from Korla, later tells a Kazakh news outlet that he saw what he described as a sunrise in the wrong direction at around 5:30 in the morning. Would you have anticipated that the real target here was not the launchers themselves, but the testing infrastructure that makes the launchers credible? Drop your answer in the comments, because that distinction matters more than anything else in this story. Here is what the PLARF lost at Korla that is not in the published damage assessments. The telemetry station contained 18 months of accumulated test data from the DF-26B MAR-V refinement program. Engineers at the 2nd Artillery's Research Institute No. 3 had been iterating on the terminal guidance algorithm through 12 test shots over the previous 2 years. The data from those 12 shots, raw telemetry, impact dispersion analysis, seeker performance logs, was stored on hardened servers in the primary processing bunker. Redundant copies existed, but the redundant backup site is in Lanzhou, 800 kilometers from Korla, and the data sync cycle runs weekly, not daily. The last sync was 6 days before the strike. 6 days of terminal guidance refinement data, including, almost certainly, the test data that validated the specific MAR-V maneuver profile that defeated the Reagan's SM-6 intercept at 4:26 a.m. Consider what that means operationally. The PLARF's research team spent 26 months and 12 live test shots developing and validating a guidance maneuver capable of defeating the SM-6's intercept basket under real engagement conditions. They validated it at 4:26 a.m. against an actual American carrier strike group in an actual engagement. Then, 38 minutes later, the 6 days of most recent refinement data for that validated maneuver. The last iteration, incorporating lessons from the 11th and 12th test shots, ceased to exist in its only real-time accessible copy. The Lanzhou backup held data through 6 days prior. Those 6 days may contain nothing significant, or they may contain the critical final calibration that made the MAR-V maneuver perform as well as it did against the Reagan's defenses. That uncertainty is now something the 2nd Artillery's research program has to live with. They know their maneuver works. They do not know, with full precision, exactly why it worked as well as it did in the final iteration, because the documentation of that final iteration is gone. The secondary consequence at Korla is harder to quantify, but potentially more significant over time. The range's infrastructure loss means the PLARF cannot conduct live fire validation tests of any DF-26B guidance modifications for at least 18 months, assuming the Zhuquan reconfiguration proceeds without delays. This is the constraint that matters. The PLARF can build more missiles. It can manufacture more re-entry vehicles. It cannot know with confidence that modifications to the guidance system work as intended without live fire testing in a facility that provides the telemetry resolution Korla provided. Testing at reduced fidelity produces results with wider error bars. Wider error bars in terminal guidance mean lower confidence in the kill probability model. Lower kill probability confidence means you need more missiles per target to achieve the same strategic effect. More missiles per target is a cost multiplier running in the wrong direction for a force planning to hold American carriers at risk across the entire Pacific theater. The PLARF fired a 4-missile salvo and generated the test data that proved its guidance package could defeat American naval defenses. Then, 38 minutes later, the facility that held that proof ceased to exist. Here is the unpopular read on what this exchange actually means. China's DF-26B program did not fail. It succeeded. It demonstrated a terminal guidance capability that the United States Navy's primary area defense missile could not reliably intercept under operational conditions against a real target in real time. That is an enormous validation. The fact that the test facility was subsequently erased does not unring that bell. The maneuver parameters exist in the minds of the engineers who designed them. The test results exist in whatever data fragments survived and in the institutional memory of the 2nd Artillery's research program. What the strike at Korla accomplished was delay, not reversal. The question that nobody in the open source community is answering yet is how long that delay actually runs. 18 months to reconstitute full testing capability at Jiuquan, if that assessment is correct. 18 months during which the PLARF's DF-26B program operates on guidance parameters that are now known, because the salvo that damaged the Reagan demonstrated them to American interceptor developers at Raytheon, at Lockheed, at the Navy Warfare Development Command. The SM-6 Block IB upgrade program received, on the morning of 4:26 a.m. local time over the Western Pacific, the single most valuable piece of target data in the history of American naval missile defense. A real MAR-V maneuver profile, executed under operational conditions, against a real target, captured by SP-6 in full sensor fidelity across the entire engagement envelope from acquisition through impact. The FLARF taught the United States exactly how its best anti-ship missile maneuvers during terminal phase. And then the United States destroyed the place where the PLARF would have refined that maneuver into something the SM-6 upgrade program cannot model against. The engineers at the Navy Warfare Development Command who worked the counter-MAR-V problem received that tracking data, stripped of classification headers for the technical working group, within 6 hours of the engagement. They have seen exercise data. They have seen range test data from simulated engagements. They have seen the models. What they had never seen before was a live operational employment of the DF-26B MAR-V against an actual carrier in actual sea state conditions under actual engagement pressure, with the raider pressing its attack while the MAR-V was still maneuvering. Real data from real physics at real stakes. That is worth more than any amount of modeling, because modeling requires assumptions, and assumptions accumulate errors, and the errors compound in exactly the direction that matters most. The direction where you are wrong about whether the intercept will work. Now they know. And what they know is the maneuver profile their SM-6 Block IB interceptor must be able to counter. 3 sailors are recovering at the Naval Hospital on Okinawa. Their names have not been released. The injuries, lacerations, a shoulder fracture, contusions from the pressure wave, are serious but not life-threatening. The Reagan senior medical officer has described their condition in a unit communication to the crew as stable and improving. The deck crew on the starboard catwalk has been reconstituted with replacement personnel. Flight operations resumed at 0710. The Reagan's SP-6 array will be at degraded capability for an estimated 48 to 72 hours, while the forward face panels are assessed and replaced from forward deployed spares. A Navy Expeditionary Logistics Support team is flying replacement panels from Yokosuka on a C-2 Greyhound, the carrier onboard delivery aircraft, scheduled to arrive before noon local time. The repair process requires the array to go to minimum power for approximately 6 hours while panels are swapped and the system recalibrated. During that window, the Antietam will take primary radar responsibility for the strike group's air picture. The strike group continues operations. The Hami launch brigade dispersed within 20 minutes of the Korla strikes. Standard FLARF protocol. The mobile launchers are on highways somewhere in Xinjiang. They carry reloads. The capability to fire another salvo is intact. The brigade commander, who executed the morning's salvo on orders from the Eastern Theater Command, is somewhere in that column of vehicles moving through the Tarim Basin in the pre-dawn dark. His mission was to demonstrate a capability. He demonstrated it. What happens next is not his decision. The United States Navy is now operating in a theater where the cost to bracket a carrier is 4 DF-26Bs at roughly $3 million each, $12 million total. The cost of the SM-6 interceptors expended in response, approximately $63 million. The cost of 2 B-21 sorties, including fuel, ordnance, and support infrastructure, classified, but the GBU-57 alone runs $14 million per unit, and there were 4 of them. Add tanker sorties, command and control overhead, the intelligence collection infrastructure that enabled the pre-positioning, and the cost of the Reagan's SP-6 panel replacement. The math on who spent what to achieve, what is the conversation nobody in Washington wants to have publicly. Iran taught the Navy this equation in the Strait of Hormuz. China just ran a live-fire version of it 78 miles off Okinawa. There is a line of thinking inside the defense analysis community. It surfaces at classified war games and occasionally leaks into the think tank literature in sanitized form. That the cost-exchange ratio and anti-access area denial is fundamentally asymmetric in ways that cannot be resolved by building more interceptors. The argument: a carrier strike group is a concentration of approximately 7,000 personnel and 80 aircraft worth collectively somewhere north of $15 billion. Holding that concentration at risk costs the PLARF approximately $12 million per salvo. Defending against that risk costs the United States a significant fraction of the magazine that protects the concentration, and the magazine costs orders of magnitude more per round than the threat it defeats. If this exchange ratio holds at scale, across multiple salvos, multiple strike groups, across a theater with a realistic shooting war timeline of weeks, not hours, the arithmetic runs in a direction that favors the side with more missiles and fewer carriers. The Navy's answer to this arithmetic is distributed maritime operations, disaggregating the strike group, removing the single point of concentration that makes the cost asymmetry so severe. Whether that doctrinal evolution is happening fast enough is a question the exchange of the last 3 hours made suddenly very concrete. In 3 previous videos on this channel, we walked through the kill chain geometry that makes the second island chain such a difficult operating environment for a carrier strike group. The layered engagement zones, the over-the-horizon targeting architecture, the satellite queuing network the PLARF relies on to generate an initial fire control solution. What yesterday's exchange added to that picture is a data point the models did not have before, a real MAR-V maneuver profile validated against a real target, in a real engagement geometry. The Navy's SM-6 Block IB upgrade program, in development for several years and focused specifically on counter-maneuvering re-entry vehicle intercept, just received the most expensive free target data in the history of American missile defense. Whether the program can incorporate that data into a fielded capability before the PLARF reconstitutes its testing infrastructure and refines the maneuver further is the race that now defines the Pacific deterrence equation. It is not a comfortable race. It is not one with a clear frontrunner. But it is the race that matters. Subscribe to Global Warfare TV. Because the next question in this theater is not whether the PLARF fires again. It is whether the SM-6 Block IB will be ready before it does. And that timeline is what this channel is going to show you next. The Reagan is back on flight operations as of this morning. The deck is lit. The aircraft are moving. From the outside, everything looks normal. The deck crew in their color-coded jerseys, yellow for aircraft handlers, red for ordnance, green for maintenance, move through their choreography with the precision of people who do the same thing every day and understand that the day it is not precise is the day someone dies. They did that yesterday too, at 4:35 a.m., when the second F-35C caught the 3-wire with 210 pounds of fuel remaining, and the ocean was still phosphorescing from the impact 410 meters off the starboard side. The magazine is lighter than it was yesterday. And somewhere on a highway in Xinjiang, the launchers are already reloading.